Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sustainability in Motion podcast, where we explore how businesses are embedding sustainability into their strategy and operations, and what this shift means for skills needed to thrive in an evolving world. I'm your host, Maria Maisaradze, founder and CEO at ED4S. At ED4S, we help organizations build and deploy high-impact sustainability training solutions. So if sustainability training on top of your mind, definitely reach out to me. I'm available on LinkedIn. Now, in this episode, we'll be talking about sustainable procurement. And I'm delighted to welcome Mark Sanderson Crouch, a seasoned procurement leader with over 22 years of experience in driving strategic and sustainable procurement. He's been managing over 4 billion euros across 5 banks at DNB Bank, and he's been also a vice president of global sourcing at Barclays, leading multiple roles as well within Dyson, overseeing procurement and commercial operations. Mark has delivered major savings while embedding sustainability into procurement practices. And today, he'll be sharing his insights with us. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, Mark. So let's kick it off and tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how did you get to sustainable procurement in your practice?
Sure. My background starts a long time ago, about 25 years, where procurement was just a little part of finance. So from that, procurement evolved over the last couple of years or many years, has evolved into a major player within any business. And buying pencils and paper to now being part of every single mass important decision-making throughout any business today. Whether it's manufacturing, finance, it can be in fast-moving goods, you have procurement next to you all the way through. So my background 25 years ago started off very, very small, but has evolved into what I call the STOP model. So it's a strategic, tactical, operational procurement person. You have to have a little of all the elements of procurement. And I've been working in the financial sectors and the manufacturing as well.
Now, just to come back to the procurement role, and maybe you can connect it to how you discovered sustainability in the procurement itself. I'm just curious, what is that maybe aha moment, or what is the turning point when an individual in procurement realizes from risk, opportunity, and the impact perspective, the power that they have to actually help their company achieve sustainability goals? What is that why for a procurement specialist to actually think about sustainability when it's so complex?
My answer is going to be not complex, but it might be challenging to your listeners. You got to understand from a procurement perspective, we do have the speed. We have to deliver. So from a manufacturing perspective, we have to deliver on any said requirements that comes from the business. So one thing is speed to market. The other thing is we also have the challenge on measuring the right supply base, having the right suppliers there. You also have to take into consideration when you have suppliers is how much money do they really place in the revenue stream that we are giving them? We have to keep them alive. It's very hard to keep a supplier alive when you measure them on sustainability constantly, and their survival of a company leans on you. So it's very important you measure what is the revenue for that company and how much sustainability do they really deliver, because that measures on your scope 3. How am I going to make them survive? And so when you're looking at that in total, are you only going to use the big companies that have the money enough to invest in that green environment that you're looking for? Or is it a maturity level that you want to find and help these suppliers become that sustainable that you need? So it's really that's the challenge here. Do you want to keep your suppliers alive or don't you? I've always seen that as a really big problem in sustainability and a procurement engagement.
Mm-hmm.
I really have.
Yeah. And we'll get into that whole capacity building later on in the conversation.
Sure.
But really interesting to actually just uncover a little bit more your definition of sustainable procurement. We're talking about scope 3. So for the listeners, who are maybe not familiar with Scope 3, this is the environmental footprint, the carbon footprint that is not under direct control of the organization. There are also other topics where there's human rights, there is pollution, there is biodiversity impacts. So, is there a standard in defining what sustainable procurement should be specifically focusing on, or is it just really company by company targets?
No, you have the different, industries that you have to focus on. Cars have to focus on the rubber industry, right? They have tires. So how are you going to build a car without a tire? So they have to focus on that. At the same time, they have to focus on the electronic and IT industries. How do I develop that? So they have a lot of things that they have to measure from a Scope 3 perspective, right? So it's every industry. If you look at shoes, leather shoes, where do they get the leather from? Now, it's not a gory detail, but they do slaughter cows to get that. And once they slaughter the cow, where does that hide go? And is it transferred in the right way? Now, the cow also has meat. Now, that's the meat industry. So now you become food. So there's all these industries that you start to measure on that are overlapping. I'll give you a great one. If you take Indonesia, they have a lot of rubber trees, and that's palm oil. Once they have harvest their oil, they have to burn down the trees to make more space for the next trees. That in the environment is so bad because the carbon is so high when they do that, and that floats as ash all over the place, all the way up to Malaysia, all the way down over to Borneo and Brunei and so on. So it's always there. That's bad for people. Now, if we educated the farmers to say, build pineapple plantations. With that pineapple plantation, if you know the strings on the pineapple, if you take those strings, they can be as strong as silk. So if you take those and you chain and you send that into the textile industry and use that to make clothing, that's something that is reoccurring, and you build a different way of life for these farmers and you reduce the carbon. So all these thinking back and forth on how do I make people more environmental friendly, and this is the E of it, will that help also from a bio point of view? Is that good for the animals in that region? Yes, the tigers will survive in Indonesia. So it's all these things that really drive in how to change people's mindset. So it's a BPR for a person or for a farmer who has palm oil and those trees. So you have to change their mindset.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that example with us. Yeah, so what you're saying is really sector specific. Look at your supply chain, which industry they're operating in, and based on that, determine what exactly do you want to track as a ESG or sustainability factor, right? Because they'll all have different impacts.
All of them.
Okay, so we're coming back to this materiality topic. And so just to follow up on that, is there a specific framework that's being used mostly in procurement? Like on the finance side, we have ISSB, what used to be SASB framework, which is sector-specific financial and material topics. Is it the same framework, or are you using GRI? What can we refer to identify those material topics in procurement?
Well, there's many out there, but they all lean up against pretty much the same. SASB was more financial, I agree. You have GRI, which is a broader information gathering tool, or at least it's not a tool, but it gathers information. CDP and CSRD. And CSRD is the European. CDP is mostly used in the US compared to, say, GRI is a global industry format.
Yeah.
Now, you have different tools out there. You have the mastodonts that gather data. There's EcoVadis that is, in fact, if you look at their background, is a procurement organization in France. They have been doing sustainability for about 30 years, also gathering that data. Now, those kind of tools are needed. Do they gather all the way down through the supply chain? No, because they have to get suppliers to do that. So if I want to gather from supplier A has to get B and B has to get C, and they have to continue down there. Now, if you don't get that data, what are you going to do? How are you going to measure? What kind of data are you going to come back with? Is it going to be full data? So those tools are needed in the markets today, and they're all the time evolving, getting better. But there's requirements of measuring these companies. However, over the last couple of years, looking at measuring these companies and giving these rule sets around it, companies have complained about it. We can't measure, or we don't want to. We don't have time to measure, right? They don't see it, but they need to. So it suddenly becomes a checkbox exercise.
Yes.
As much as they can. And that's kind of scary.
And we've seen it actually from my experience working with more European clients. So we've seen this checkbox type of requirements, part of RFP. Do you measure your carbon footprint? What's your waste management practices? Which is really interesting. Although I felt it wasn't as pertinent because it didn't feel industry specific, but it's at least a way to engage and create awareness that this is important for us as a client. And if it's a big client, some companies might actually start putting effort and budget into transparency, reporting, and management because it becomes a business opportunity that may be lost if they don't score enough on ESG.
If companies understood, I'm sorry for interrupting, but if companies understood that who drives the sustainability agenda today, even though the governments are doing it, but who drives it? It is the consumer. Do they want to buy sustainable products? Yes or no? Now, that's the question that needs to be answered.
Yeah.
Most people will say yes. Remember when eco started coming out? Do I buy an eco banana, or do I buy one that's been sprayed with all pesticides and everything else? What do I want? Oh, I want this eco banana. Yeah, but you got to pay more for it. So now the consumer has to accept to pay more for sustainability because that, in fact, in quotation marks, is the hype. Now, let's go back. Consumers buy a lot of electronics. They use about $9.2 billion on one day called Black Friday. Now, if we take that money and reverse it and say, why don't we make Green Thursday instead? Only sustainable products are sold. Everybody buys and uses $9.2 billion on sustainable material, sustainable products. Would they do that?
Yeah.
That's a big question, because that question would drive any financial decision from a financial perspective. Which company should I invest in? Which one is showing me that they really believe in what the consumer wants? 86% of young people today want sustainability. They want to buy products that are made sustainable. 86%.
And then it comes to the corporate decision, right? Do we want to target that market? Is this market going to grow? Is it going to shrink? So it comes down to executive level, because at the end of the day, procurement people are busy. Their teams are already overworked and stretched in today's cost-cutting environment. And this definitely adds a lot of work to them, right? Now they need to engage, they need to add extra questions, they need to conduct extra due diligence. So wanted to see from your perspective, working at Dyson and Barclays, when it comes to embedding sustainability into procurement role, was this often enough kind of communicated and put from top down, or was it more of your individual passion and commitment that made you put an extra effort and implement sustainability into the work that you were doing?
From a banking perspective, it was not in that way. It was something that we thought about, but it was not directed like that, because it was more from an investment point of view and so on. How are we building our products? But from a manufacturing point of view, definitely that was top level driven, that we had to focus on that. Had a whole team of sustainability people, CSR people, telling us this has to be a part of it. And we measure our suppliers and out there and doing the audit of the supplier, making sure that they were as sustainable as possible. At the same time, taking into consideration, like you just said, people are stretched. They're stretched in procurement. We have to deliver. There's timelines, there's deadlines, and we have to make sure that the price is right. So the cost factor here is definitely one thing. But when you take your risk analysis, definitely sustainability is part of that risk. It's not a checkbox exercise. It is part of the risk. If anybody does anything, either it's scope 2, scope 3, scope 4, whatever it measures on, and if they have done anything wrong within that sustainability, not from an environmental only impact, but it could be one of the other letters, the social impact, then that flies through the whole supply chain. That ruins your supply chain. So it was more forced in that way from a manufacturing production environment.
Yeah.
But of course, we needed to think about it in the financial sector.
This episode is brought to you by ED4S, the sustainability training solution designed for scalable workforce training. ED4S makes it easy to build, launch, and maintain time-efficient, role-specific sustainability training for your teams. Developed by industry experts and trusted by leading organizations worldwide, visit ed4s.org to download a free case study and see how ED4S can work for you.
And I could see how in manufacturing, this is really priority because at the end of the day, you are reliant on natural resources that cost money and that increase in price, the energy that it takes. So thinking about circularity, reducing the waste, reinjecting the proceeds back into process, or maybe, reselling it is definitely just a business economical value, right, for the business?
You're touching upon the right points because the processes within manufacturing, you can do many things of that you purchase. So material that you purchase, that you use, but there's drop-offs for that material that can be used to recircle and recycle on that based on whatever you grab. You sell back to your supplier. The supplier utilizes an X percentage of that and sells it to you at different cost.
Yeah.
The whole thing is recycling.
Yeah.
And that does have a financial impact also for the consumer.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it really changes the role of procurement person, right? Before you were the buyer, but now you're becoming a buyer and the seller at the same time. So
that's exactly what sustainability does. It makes you become more innovative.
yeah.
I mean, I will never stop dreaming about that Green Thursday, even though it's a German holiday. That Green Thursday is huge.
Mark, but I do need to challenge you on that one because, like, for example, our process, our sustainable business management, number one is, do you need to buy this? If we don't need to buy this, if this has no impact, we're not going to. So first thing, buy less. Second thing, buy used. And third one, if you buy it, then you buy more responsible and sustainable products. But the first one is actually, let's just not buy. So I would vote for a Thursday where we just not buy anything, just to kind of challenge you on your Thursday, sustainable Thursday idea.
That would probably be don't buy on Wednesday. I don't know. But let's go back to your third bullet point. What was that? You mentioned it yourself.
So the second one was buy secondhand. I know it's not possible a lot of the time in the financial institutions. Us as a smaller business, we're actually, buying on marketplace. We're buying pre-owned things. And that not only costs us less, but also, significantly reduces our footprint.
Well, it's all retro clothes, right? The young people today walk around in clothes that I wore 20 years ago. So that's it's awesome. I'm hype again, right? But no, you can buy used. That's really good. But the last point that you mentioned was you buy with a sense of responsibility, and that sense of responsibility would be buying sustainable TV, components made of sustainable material, sustainable components. As much as possible, recycled components are sustainable. So, it's that kind of sale that these companies should be doing.
Yeah.
Of course, electronics, the big thing is, I want an iPhone, I want a Google, I want a Samsung, whatever. They will produce with the components that they have, and they try to become as sustainable as possible. But if they have a version that is more sustainable than their flagship,
Yeah.
that's what we want to get to. Not sync the usability like they normally do.
So let's dive into it. And we don't have that much time left, but I really want this to be clear for our listeners. When we talk sustainable procurement, what does good really looks like in practice? Like you've been working with multiple companies, both internally and externally. So could you maybe walk us through what is the top best sustainable, responsible procurement practices that you've seen that maybe our listeners can take back to their companies and implement internally?
Well, I think it's a mix of most of the things I've said today. There's a checkbox environment that says we got to be green. Think outside the box. Take that away. Don't even think like that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, from a procurement perspective, you got to think as a supplier and for the supplier. The supplier is so important for a company. Without a supplier, you can't survive. You can't deliver. So keep them alive. Educate them. Educate them and take them on the journey that you're on yourself. You give them, and that's. I'm not saying that I'm from a procurement perspective that I am a procurement guy that tries to stay on top of the suppliers, but give them the rules of engagement. Give them the box to be in. And once you get on that journey, your sustainability journey, that is, you have to measure them. You have to monitor them. You have to work with them and educate them. You have to invest in them. So let's just say I want to have a better carbon footprint, and my supplier that I have used for 10, 15 years does not have the revenue or income to change the process behind that. If I invest in that company from another company's perspective, and I invest in them, and I build them a waste management process in the best possible way, that will benefit me when I do my sustainability reporting out towards the financial institutions. So you've got to work with these suppliers. You've got to educate them. You can't threaten them by throwing them out because they're not sustainable. You have to work with them. And that is an investment that companies have to make.
Yeah. The word you use multiple times is educate. And because we're an educational company, I really want to double down on that one. I definitely agree with you. The challenge comes in the volume, right? You could have thousands of suppliers. And obviously, as procurement specialists, they're busy. How do you go about educating your advice? Have you seen any practices? Is it one-on-one conversations? Is it group meetings? Are you providing them some kind of educational resources? How does it look in practice?
Most people on this, on your podcast here will be procurement people and financial people. But to the procurement people out there, it's an 80-20 rule, right? So 20% of your biggest suppliers have 80% of the rev, right?
Uh-huh.
You have to dig down and say, good. You have to segment all your suppliers. All your suppliers will be segmented, and there you need to have your one-on-one meetings. You have to inform them. You send that letter. You say, I want to talk to you about sustainability, but you send that to your top 100 suppliers. If you have 15, 16,000 suppliers that I've been used to working with,
Right.
you can't do that. So you need to specify that, and then you have to make decisions. Some of these suppliers will not be your supplier for a long time because you've only placed one order and it was an emergency order and they're not part of that ecosystem that you're building up.
Mm-hmm.
You need to build up your ecosystem of suppliers, your main core suppliers, and that might be 4, that might be 10. But outside of that, there might be 90 or 200. So you have to treat them as segmented supply bases. You need to have the conversation. But you can't have the conversation with all of them. So you need to inform them. This is what we need. Can you do this? So it's always a back and forth.
Right.
I mean, I could take you through the category manager. A category manager with 100 suppliers. Category managers works 365 days, right? Those 100 suppliers is his or her supply base. I have to manage them. I only talk to 10 of them a year because those are the 10 that I have to have deliver something for me. My business stakeholder will come and say, I need an RFP done. Good. An RFP needs to find 3 or 4 different suppliers that will challenge on that price and maybe change. So there's an onboarding process. So right there, I don't have time to talk to 100 suppliers. I have a time to talk to 15 suppliers a year. So when I go back to my supplier that I've not been talking to for about 364 days and say, I need your sustainability figures, they're going to tell me something and that I don't want to say out loud now because I haven't been talking to them anyway. So what do they need it for? So it's a relationship, and it needs to be on that journey.
Right.
That's how you get them to play the ball game.
Yeah.
And you need to educate. So that's communication.
Absolutely. And I see so much synergies actually with the investment teams because they're also looking at this information. They're also trying to engage. So I hope that procurement and investment teams are increasingly talking to each other because they're most likely investing in the same companies, right? Microsoft, Google, etc. So I really hope to see that education and collaboration come more to life in financial sector to enable this more collective action with suppliers.
I will say I've had a lot of talks with investors. They have called and I've talked to them trying to understand how companies internally think from a procurement perspective and drive the best sustainable solutions possible. They look at various things, but at the bottom line is the manufacturing of the products. How sustainable are they? And do they get out to the consumer, and are the consumers buying them? And that's based on either sustainability or non-sustainability products. So that's really the question. How do we get them to understand what to look at?
Yeah.
And is the data right?
One of the biggest challenges.
Is the data right?
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for giving us all this light on procurement. And I definitely learned a lot in terms of the scope of work that goes into procurement process. And now we're adding the sustainability angle, but I think the way you're positioning it needs to be integrated. It's part of the risk management. So whether or not it's environmental factors or social factors, it's a way to protect reputation, right? And what I'm taking away is really the educational piece, really important, not only the procurement specialists themselves to understand what to look out for, but also actually companies in your, the 20%, let's say top 20% of your suppliers, and working with them collaboratively, not in a way of just imposing and making it hard for them, but working together through this.
Yeah. If I can add on to that, just think about how many suppliers are in your supply chain. If you take your 20 top suppliers, ask them all, how many suppliers do they have? And how many suppliers do they have? And how many suppliers do they have? And you're getting down to tier 4. So your 20 top has 20,000, 400,000 suppliers behind them in the supply chain. Just think about that from a social perspective. So your ESG, right, which I call G as E, because the government and those rules and regulations they put on us will change us socially, will change the way that we work in companies, that will drive the environmental impact. So it does have that G as E effect. But just remember that S is so important when you start looking at your supply chain. My 20 top becomes 400,000 suppliers that are delivering that scope 3 to you.
Right.
That's a big number.
Yes, definitely is.
How to manage that if anybody does something socially wrong within your supply chain.
Yeah, and the ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly. The ripple effect, exactly.
Well, thanks, Mark, for sharing all these insights with us. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. And if our listeners are looking to connect with you, you're available on LinkedIn. And can you share a bit where they can reach you? Maybe is there a website or email?
Yeah, no, just contact me on LinkedIn. That's perfect.
Perfect. Thanks for all the insights. Take care.
Thank you.
If today's episode sparked ideas for your team, visit ed4s.org. That's ed4s.org to explore our customizable corporate learning solutions or book a quick discovery call. You don't have to figure it out alone.